Hello students. So now I will discuss with you another environmental emergency, that is hyperthermia. So what do we do in the emergency management of hyperthermia? So what is hyperthermia? Now before I tell you about the severe type of hyperthermia, its management, let us discuss few definitions, right? Let us know about little bit about heat related illness. So heat related illness is a continuum of condition. It is a result of conditions that results from body's inability to deal with heat, stress and dissipate excessive heat. So body cannot dissipate, cannot remove the excessive heat, right? So body is unable to deal with the heat stress which it is subjected to. So that is why this heat related illness result. Okay, body has a large capacity to dissipate the heat. So when this decompensate, when this capacity gets loosened, then the heat related illness results. Now it may result in minor illness such as heat cramps, heat edema, prickly heat, as well as heat syncope or heat exhaustion. These are minor variants. Prickly heat, heat edema, heat cramps, heat syncope or heat exhaustion can take place. Or major problems, classical heat stroke or exertional heat stroke. Classical heat stroke and exertional heat strokes, these represents the most severe manifestation, right? These are the heat related illness which are associated with CNS symptom, which are associated with central nervous system symptoms, right? And multi-organ damage. Okay, so these in the continuum of presentation, these are the most severe presentation of heat illness. Okay, so what would be the clinical features of the heat illness, hyperthermia? Typically, the temperature should be above 40 degrees Celsius. Whenever the temperature is above 40 degrees Celsius, there would be a sympathetic stimulation, there would be tachycardia. Normally, initially the patient would be normotensive, but later on patient can become hypotensive. If the core temperature further increases, CNS dysfunction will take over. Ultimately, the pupillary function would be affected. Pupil may get fixed, dilated, pinpoint, right? It may remain normal also in a number of cases, right? Nystagmus may develop in the patient and maybe a hyperdynamic cardiovascular state results or hypodynamic cardiovascular state results. So the clinical features are very variable. It can be hyperdynamic cardiovascular state, it can be hypodynamic cardiovascular space, tachypnea, hypoventilation, gastrointestinal hemorrhage can happen frequently, jaundice, elevated liver enzymes, fulminant liver failure, DIC can occur, muscle tenderness, cramping can happen, rhabdomyolysis and ARF are also common complication, especially in exertional heat stroke, which I will discuss with you. So the continuum of symptoms, there are variety of symptoms, there are extremes of symptoms of heat stroke, right? Heat related illness can be presented, can manifest in very different way, right? So heat related illness can manifest in many different way. Okay, so let us discuss few definitions, right? What is heat stroke? How it is defined? Heat stroke is the most severe manifestation of hypothermia and it is defined as hypothermia usually greater than 40 degrees Celsius with severe CNS dysfunction and hydrosis, that is inability to sweat, and has mortality rate up to 70%, right? Now the definition is according to the temperature above 40 degrees Celsius, but this is not fixed since some patient of heat stroke has received a cooling treatment before they have come to the emergency department. So this cannot be a fixed criteria, and otherwise also in some patients of heat stroke they retain the ability to sweat, right? So again this cannot be a fixed criteria. Basically heat stroke is diagnosed clinically. Definition is one thing, clinical diagnosis is another thing. Heat stroke is clinically diagnosed by assessing the constellation of symptoms and physical finding and not by absolute definition. Group of symptoms which patient is coming with and the physical finding is more required for diagnosis of heat stroke rather than the definition. And heat stroke can be divided into two: classical heat stroke and exertional heat stroke, right? So heat stroke, both classical heat stroke and exertional heat stroke, have significantly different presentation and different clinical scenarios. They have a different presentation and different clinical scenarios. Okay, let us talk about classical heat stroke, right? What is this classical heat stroke? Now, classical heat stroke typically occurs during environmental heat waves as a result of body failure to dissipate the heat, right? So this occurs during heat waves, and it is more common in very young patients or in elderly patients or chronically mentally ill patients. And it is also more common in the patients who are on some medication which again affects the ability of body to dissipate heat, right? And how does the patient present? That patient has spent lot of time outside, presents with hypothermia, altered sensorium, and have developed suddenly after prolonged exposure to high temperature. So patient has been outdoor for some time and outdoor temperature is high, and after that patient had developed hyperthermia, increased body temperature and altered sensorium. Most probably it is classical heat stroke. Classical heat stroke. Sweating ceases in majority of these patients. By sweating, the body heat is dissipated, but sweating ceases in majority of these patients, and variety of CNS symptoms come, varying from irritability to coma. Patient can be initially irritable, maybe in delusion, hallucination, right? Seizures or coma can take place, right? Now, I told you, patient may be on some or other drugs like diuretics, antihypertensive, anticholinergic, neuroleptics, which may impair patient's ability to tolerate the heat stress, right? Advanced age, hypotension, coagulopathy, endotracheal intubation are poor prognostic indicators regardless of the heat measures. So if patient is of old age, patient has developed hypotension, then patient has developed coagulopathy, or we have to intubate the patient because of comatose presentation, then the prognosis of this kind of patient is very poor. Okay. Now, I discussed about classical heat stroke, which develops from environmental exposure of heat waves, especially in a special population. Exertional heat stroke is different. Exertional heat stroke usually affects young, healthy individuals who are unable to dissipate heat due to unable to dissipate a huge amount of heat produced due to increased endogenous heat production. Due to the intense physical activity, huge amount of heat is produced in the body, and these individuals are unable to dissipate it, right? This is more commonly seen during military training, in athletes on training. Huge amount of physical stress, huge amount of heat produced in the body, unable to dissipate that heat, right? These patients present with hypothermia, diaphoresis, altered sensorium, and usually they develop these during a hot and humid temperature. When these athletes or these military soldiers are being trained in a temperature, higher hot and humid temperature, right? The heat production, they are in a vigorous training. The heat production in the body increases, and there is more likely exertional heat stroke can develop in these patients. What are the clinical features? Abdominal cramping, nausea, vomiting, myalgia, diarrhea, headache, dizziness, right? Dyspnea, weakness, syncope, right? Typically precedes exertional heat stroke. So initially patient will have abdominal cramping, patient will have nausea and vomiting, patient will have myalgia, patient will have diarrhea, right? Headache, dizziness, dyspnea, weakness, right? Obesity and poor physical fitness, right? If the person who is obese and doesn't have a good physical fitness and he is exerted to intense physical activity. There's a lack of acclimatization in this person. The chances of developing exertional heat stroke is more. So obesity, poor physical status, preceding illness, lack of acclimatization are risk factors that predispose these patients to heat related illness. So they are more predisposed to heat related illness. Okay. Now exertional heat stroke can also result in drug addicts because they are under the effect of drug like cocaine or amphetamine, and they have like increased activity. They increase their motor activity increases, right? Or they have a prolonged seizure. Again, the same thing will happen. Increased heat production in the body, unable to dissipate that heat, and exertional heat stroke can result. So a drug addict can also present with exertional heat stroke, right? Normally, these patients, unlike the classical heat stroke, maintain the ability to sweat. So they have a significantly lower core temperature compared to exertional heat stroke, where ability to sweat is lost. Here ability to sweat is retained. Okay. Now patient of exertional heat stroke, they develop a heat stroke after muscle exertion. So they are more preceded by rhabdomyolysis, renal failure, acute renal failure, coagulopathy, lactic acidosis, hypoglycemia, right, than with patient with classical heat stroke, because here muscular activity has increased. So muscle breakdown may precede exertional heat stroke, right? Muscle breakdown can precede exertional heat stroke. So this is how classical heat stroke and exertional heat stroke varies, right? Classical heat stroke typically is seen in old or young, very young person who are exerted to a very high external environmental temperature. And exertional heat stroke is more classically seen in young individual after intense physical activity, right? Okay. Few more definitions of heat related illness. Heat cramps. Heat cramps is simply a brief, intermittent, severe cramps of lower extremities, muscle fatigue caused by excessive exercise. So brief, intermittent pain, cramps in muscle, fatigued by excessive exercise. And normally, when you stop the exercise, then the cramp occurs at the time of rest. They are mostly due to salt deficiency and usually would occur in first few days of excessive work in hot and humid environment. So this is just a milder form of working in hot and humid environment. Normally after exertion in hot and humid environment, when you take rest, there's a brief intermittent severe cramps in fatigued muscle, right? Then we have heat edema. When suddenly someone goes to hot and humid climate, not acclimatized to that climate, then what happens? The hydrostatic pressure of their intravascular hydrostatic pressure increases, and because of the vasodilatation and vascular edema happens, right? Heat edema is characterized by edema of feet and ankle in an unacclimatized individual exposed to warm, tropical or subtropical climates. It is thought to be result of excessive hydrostatic pressure and vasodilatation resulting in vascular leak and edema. Okay. Heat syncope is temporary loss of consciousness. Caused by intravascular shunting to cutaneous circulation, because patient is let's say exposed to the hot environment and blood from core goes to the periphery, cutaneous circulation. So pooling of the blood happens in the lower extremities, right? Especially in lower extremities due to prolonged standing in heat weather. Patient is volume depleted, and what happens? There is a temporary loss of consciousness. This is more commonly seen in elderly patients after a prolonged standing, right? After prolonged standing in hot and humid weather, right? Just a temporary loss of consciousness due to intravascular shunting of blood to the cutaneous circulation. Okay. Heat exhaustion is characterized by malaise, fatigue, nausea, vomiting, weakness, headache in setting of heat stress. Clinically it is very difficult to diagnose, very difficult to differentiate between heat exhaustion heat stroke and heat exhaustion. Heat stroke and heat exhaustion, very difficult to differentiate, right? And number of times we are unable to differentiate. Management of heat exhaustion is also like classical heat stroke. So we start cooling the patient. So what happens in heat exhaustion? The core temperature is frequently normal or little bit mildly elevated, unlike classical heat stroke. The patient is frequently water depleted due to inadequate hydration. And patient is not only water depleted, both water and salt depleted. Number of times patient is taking hypotonic, getting rehydrated by hypotonic solution, so mostly he is salt depleted, right? So the only major thing which you differentiate between heat exhaustion and heat stroke is mentation. In heat exhaustion, patient has a normal mental status, but he may be tachycardic, right? And classical heat stroke, it is mentation of the patient is affected. But clinically it is difficult to differentiate, so management is more or less on the same line. So let us discuss how do we manage these patients. How do we manage this patient? So we start with primary survey and management. We obtain a fasting blood sugar in all these patients with altered mental status, rapidly obtain a rectal temperature, initiate rapid cooling simultaneously, and other basic resuscitative measures. So we start with ABC, airway, breathing, ventilation. After taking care of the basic resuscitation, ABC, I obtain a fasting blood sugar. If the mentation of the patient is altered, we attach a probe for measuring the core temperature and initiate rapid cooling measures. We start a rapid cooling measure. Now, diagnostics testing is utilized to exclude other etiologies of hypothermia and altered sensorium, as well as evaluate the complication associated with heat-related illness, right? No laboratory changes, no laboratory investigation can be pathognomonic of heat stroke, right? So, normally glucose testing, blood glucose is one of the initial tests performed in patient with altered mental status. Okay. Other electrolyte imbalance patient is looked for. Hypernatremia or hyponatremia may be present in these patients. Hypernatremia may be present because of reduced intake and patient is dehydrated, but patient may be hyponatremic also because of free water, right? Drinking free water. Patient may be hypokalemia and early heat stroke, but may be hyperkalemia and exertional heat stroke, right? In the setting of muscle damage. Liver function may be, liver LFTs may be deranged. Patient's LFTs may be deranged because of liver dysfunction. And muscle function test, that is creatinine kinase, may be very high. CBC, the complete blood count, may show leukocytosis, thrombocytopenia, right? Renal function is important, especially in exertional heat stroke. In exertional heat stroke, because of muscle necrosis, myoglobin is released, which is nephrotoxic. So patient can go into acute renal failure. So we have to side by start seeing all the reports. We have to send all the reports and start seeing all the result of the reports and start the management of these complications of heat strokes as well, right? So urine analysis is done for diagnosing hematuria, myoglobin in urine, right? So these, if there is a globulin in urine, then patient is going towards the acute renal failure. So we have to start the management accordingly to prevent the acute renal failure in these patients. We have to give a mass rehydration of the patient, right? Hematuria in blood, in urine, if the blood is there, hematuria is there, again it points toward rhabdomyolysis, muscle breakdown. So we have to see all this investigation and start our management accordingly. Okay. Okay. Chest X-ray, if we get chest X-ray done, there may be pulmonary infarction, edema or atelectasis, right? Head CT or lumbar puncture may be obtained to rule out CNS abnormalities in patient with altered mental status. Patient has come with altered mental status. Patient has high body temperature. Patient may be get confused for a bacterial meningitis, etc. So maybe a CT scan is done and lumbar puncture is done to rule out the other causes, right? ECG is done, will demonstrate sinus tachycardia, right? And non-specific STT wave change. No other pathognomonic feature in ECG would be seen in heat stroke patients. Okay. What is the treatment? What is the treatment? Treatment should be aimed to carry out the basic resuscitation and immediate aggressive cooling measures. So if the patient has altered mentation, patient will not be able to protect his airway, we will intubate, right? We will intubate the patient. IV cannulas are put to the patient and resuscitation is started. Patient is put on continuous cardiac monitoring and pulse oximetry, right? Now 20 to 65% of the patient in heat stroke will go into acute circulatory failure due to volume loss of dehydration, right? So they are mostly in a distributive shock. So a thermistor is put and a rapid fluid resuscitation is started. And after putting the thermistor for monitoring the core temperature, immediate cooling of the patient is the cornerstone for the management, right? So immediate cooling is started. Now rapid reduction of the core temperature should be immediately started, right? Depending upon the duration and extent of hypothermia, right? So management and the outcome is totally dependent upon the fact that how fast, how rapidly you start cooling the patient. The core temperature should rapidly lowered to 38 to 39 degrees Celsius. Clothing should be removed and active, let's say, cooling of the patient should be started. So what are the means by which we can cool the patient? There are special cooling blankets, right, which is put on the patient. In the absence of these special blankets, patient is poured with cold water, covered with water soaked sheets, air, let's say fans blow, cool air is blown on the patient to evaporate. Ice packs are applied on the patients, right? Ice water immersion was previously preferred, not preferred nowadays, because it may lead to vasoconstriction and reduce the heat transfer. So nowadays immersion of the patient in ice water is not preferred, right? Other cooling methods should be employed, like peritoneal bladder gastric lavage with ice water, cold IV fluids, cool oxygen. Antipyretics should never be given to these patients with heat related illness, since it has no efficiency in reducing the temperature and may exacerbate hepatic, renal and coagulation abnormalities in these patients. So never antipyretics are given to these patients, right? Okay. One drug, dantrolene, which we use for treatment in neuroleptic malignant syndrome. What does dantrolene do? It's a central muscle relaxant which stops the calcium release from sarcoplasmic reticulum, right? Decrease in intracellular calcium levels reduce the muscle metabolic activity and stops the heat production. It is used for the treatment of malignant hypothermia, neuroleptic malignant syndrome also it is used in the treatment. Well, research have shown, right, there is limited literature though, that this can be effective. So that is why it is not the first line of management, but an unresponsive patient who is not responding to the routine methods of cooling, dantrolene is one drug which we can use. So let me summarize, how do we cool the patient? Evaporative technique, wetting the body surface and continuous fanning, external non-invasive conduction techniques, tap water immersion, ice water immersions, though not practiced nowadays, application of cold packs, cooling blanket, right? Internal conduction technique, bladder wash, etc., gastric, peritoneal, bladder lavage, cold IV fluids, pharmacological technique, that is dantrolene what we are using, right? If when we are cooling the patient develops shivering, we have to stop the shivering, because shivering would again increase the heat production of the body. So normally benzodiazepine is used for controlling the shivering, right? This is also drug of choice for controlling seizure. Since if patient develops seizures, we use benzodiazepine for controlling seizures also, because remember, phenytoin would not be effective in the setting of hypothermia. If patient doesn't respond to benzodiazepine, we can go for barbiturates, right? And remember, when you start rewarming the patient can go into circulatory failure. So since the patient with hypotension has a very high mortality, if patient develops hypotension, so we have to be very aggressive in management of hypotension. So hemodynamic instability, we may require a vasoactive agent, vasopressors, to maintain the perfusion, right? Remember, hemodynamic instability is associated with high mortality. So fluid resuscitation should be the initial treatment, titrated for adequate volume status and hemodynamic parameters. Additional treatment should be based on patient's underlying clinical conditions, right? So actually the shock developed in hyperthermia is distributive shock. It's same as distributive shock. So what can happen, that the management can be in the term of distributive shock, right? Patient can be given fluids, inotropes, right? Noradrenaline infusion can be started, etc. So management is on the line of distributive shock. Now remember, another complication of the heat stroke is rhabdomyolysis. So again, it's a common complication of exertional heat stroke. Large amount of myoglobin goes into the kidney. It can result in acute renal failure. So dark colored urine, etc. are the classic findings. So treatment is large amount of IV fluid, flush the kidney with fluids, right, to prevent precipitation of myoglobin in the renal tubules. Hemodialysis may be required in these patients, right? So we have to aggressively treat the circulatory failure, we have to aggressively treat the rhabdomyolysis, then only we can save the patient in hypothermia, okay? There is a list of the patient who has a very poor prognosis in hypothermia. If the initial temperature of the patient is above 40 degrees Celsius, patient has 41 degrees Celsius, patient has a poor prognosis. Persistent elevation of temperature in spite of cooling measure, temperature is not decreasing, poor prognosis. GCS less than 12, decreased mentation. Severe pulmonary edema if it has developed. Delayed and prolonged hypotension, lactic acidosis, right? Acute renal failure, hyperkalemia. Liver function deranged. Elderly patient who have pre-existing cancer or coronary artery disease, or patient on treatment with diuretics, they all have poor prognosis, right? So remember, these patients, and if a patient has a hypothermia at a distance place and it takes lot of time to reach the patient to the hospital for active let's say cooling of the patient, for taking basic measure, if the time interval between hypothermia and starting of the management is long, again the prognosis becomes poor. So these are the signs of poor prognosis. Patients in hypothermia has a huge mortality and they needs to be admitted in ICU for aggressive management after initial management in emergency department. Thank you.